Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video review of Shroud of the Avatar. I apologise for the low volume in the last one. Thanks to microphone boosting, this one should be much louder. And for those of you wondering what on earth that starting image was, it's a cow, it's a corsage, it's a cowsage, and don't ask any more questions. Now, last time we were running on a low-end system. Today we're swapping to the brand spanking new custom machine. Behold its power! I also swapped up a monitor size from native 1440 by 900 to 1680 by 1050. I discovered when cross-checking the figures shown here that RAM, when analysed directly, will always report half the advertised speed. It's actually 8GB of HyperX Beast Dual DDR3 2133 MHz. Both Windows and Shroud are on the solid-state drive, and for the first part of this review we'll be Fraps recording to that drive as well. So far, this machine has taken everything I've thrown at it on Ultra settings. Shroud proves a little more complicated. It suggests our settings are only good. Well, we're not going to take that from a game that isn't even out of alpha yet. It gets the resolution wrong too. Let's just swap it. Wait, what? At this point, the game immediately crashes to desktop. I try launching back into windowed full screen mode with no real success, and then back to the normal launcher, where it now sees my settings as custom. There's a fun bug with the horrible UI where you can press escape on the title screen to access the options, and they'll appear behind the launcher message, and both windows are still active. I have to try and tidy the screens up before I can get back into options. There, I discover for some reason it has now accepted the resolution change that caused the crash. We'll ramp the game up to the maximum possible prettiness for a fair comparison to the last video. Aggressive decoration loading applies, I think, to play-around houses and their pop-up reindeer. It's interesting, though, that it still doesn't suggest anti-aliasing, which is rather shocking considering the GPU I'm currently running. I'll add the best possible shadows as well. To also be fair, I recorded this video at the peak possible playtime for the game, around midday on a Sunday in the UK time. We not only get to see the lesser-spotted login queue, but the unbelievable excitement of another real-life player. But before then, the best bit from the last video, the loading screen again. We're loading from and recording to the SSD here, remember. Previously, our Doris took 1 minute and 30 seconds to load. Now it takes 1 minute and 18 seconds. Not exactly an impressive saving considering the huge performance boost since. As this review is going to include a colossal amount of downtime, where I edit the video, you'll see this screen indicating how much time has been snipped. I had to do this as from my chosen starting point to crafting my first item took almost 2 hours. I'm not joking, sadly. It took 2 hours. And so let's get on with setting up our object making odyssey. Here we are, back where we logged out aboard a boat in our Doris, and needless to say, we still can't sleep in our Lord and Master's bed. Yah, you can keep your fancy bedding, matey, and stuff it right up your bilges. My original plan whilst recording was to head straight to Owl's Head, where I knew I could get to a nearby mining location and back again relatively quickly. But I've kept in the running through our doors to let you compare graphical performance to the video review part 1. And once we escape this empty, boring hold, it's so much nicer, isn't it? Lighting and shadows are more impressive, object sharpness is much better and extends to a greater distance, and we're not suffering anywhere near the same system slowdown as before. I can't see any skeletons in the water this time to entertain me, but I do accidentally discover the same old bug though, unfixed from the very first release, where the left-hand side of some stairs has a single brick that you can't run through. But, I hear you cry, that's rather a bad show, old chap. The game is still in alpha, don't you know? Well, whilst we run and reveal our Doris on my better system, let's quickly discuss what that currently means. Since I made my first video, on December the 17th in 2015, Darkstar the developer made a statement on the forums, stating that the hoped-for beta release and final server wipe, or reset, is now predicted for the midsummer of 2016. Payment plans have also been extended out to June of that year, but given a choice between becoming feature complete, the end of alpha, and getting to the place where they can perform the final wipe, they'll prioritise the wiping option. To quote Darkstar, that is why you will not see quite as much content listed as the last quarter, despite our increased staff. See the link in the description of this video below for the relevant thread. Apart from the justifiable frustration at the release date slipping yet again, there are two important issues to grasp here. Firstly, the game as revealed so far in these videos isn't likely to change all that much in the next 6 months, considering the already sloth-like pace of content addition in the last 3 years. And secondly, after Final Wipe, anything the players do will become persistent, so the design decision taken is to begin the land rush before the game is anywhere near feature complete. In the last video we discussed how the badly implemented player-owned towns meant housing spaces were no longer rare, so the land rush idea was largely irrelevant anyway, and now it appears it's been abandoned entirely. The focus is instead upon trying to retain already invested players through making their gameplay permanent. Now, I'm undecided upon what this will mean for you, the newbie player. As this video progresses, you'll see just how little I can do, and how slow it is for me to do it even when I can find it. Polishing the game instead of adding new content may help you find your way, or it may lock you into the abhorrent material imbalances between the virtual elite and you, the scruffy pauper. All that can be said for sure is, in Darkstar's own words, you will not see quite as much content listed from here on in. We finally get to see an actual living soul, though. Chatting to him will prove difficult, however. Look bottom left and we've got 3 different conversation tabs open already, and I can't remember what tab 0 and tab 1 do. If a player is not facing me, or doesn't have a tab with local chat enabled and open at the same time, he won't know I've spoken to him. I can message him directly by double-clicking him and opening yet another tab unique to him, but he'll need to spot that new tab too. It's not a very usable system. So instead, as promised in the last video, I wander off towards the Oracle to flag myself as PvP enabled. There's another player by the crafting tables there. By Shroud standards, the game is heaving today. Turning global PvP on is simply a case of double-clicking the Oracle and selecting the word protection to set myself as freely attackable. The consequences of doing this are unknown at present, as the Shroud FAQ that discusses it links to a PvP Megathread that was locked and then hasn't been updated in over 15 months. The suggestion was that if you're killed, you can lose or ransom back a single item, as well as possibly having body parts cut off as a trophy. But, like so much of the game, this exists only on paper for now, and with the content freeze, may not exist at all at launch. So, caveat emptor, buyer beware, you player killers. Before I go to Owl's Head, I decide to quickly run past the locations we looked at in the last video, and as I approach, you'll notice that neither the homes nor the items look that different under the highest settings. This is because the standard of art simply isn't that great, with the game more focused upon churning new items through the store to capture the impulse spending of whales, rather than adding true quality. I'm about to look at the Duke Mansion next when, out of the corner of my eye, I notice I'm being followed by the entire population of Ardoris, it seems. All 2 of them. The game currently attempts to have a minimalist UI, so it's the sound of weapons being drawn that makes me keep an eye on what they're doing. That's my reason for getting caught on a small brick again, and it's a story I'm sticking to. I had to watch this video a few times again myself to work out exactly what happens next. Neither of the people here were flagged for PvP before this moment, but when Buddha casts what I think is a healing buff on me, he's then flagged himself. And that, folks, is the pulse racing, high-paced excitement and completely logical rule set of PvP and Shroud. For the remaining 2 and a bit odd hours, I wander around the world openly flagged, but no one else tries to engage with me in any way at all, not in PvP, and not even in roleplay. More snipping here. You don't miss much, except I discovered that reward pets are in-game, but only as inanimate objects for now. They certainly can't be sitting on your shoulder like any true pirate would wish for. So, my crafting target for today is to make my own cutlass. Let's have a look at what that entails, shall we? Okay, to make a cutlass we need to make the blade and hilt separately. This is because each subpart applies a different buff to the final weapon. To make the blade, we also need to make an iron blank. Why? No asking questions, remember? You just do. So, to make a blank we need to make iron ingots, and iron ingots also have their own crafting recipe. Oh, and don't forget that hilt now, and that all of them require coal as well as the iron ore for each stage. You can already tell how much fun this is going to be, can't you? There's also the problem that you need both access to a crafting table, as you can't craft on the move, and somewhere to get the resources from. The fastest guaranteed route between the 2 that I know of, but you the newbie won't know in-game, is between Owl's Head on the left here and Owl's Nest on the right. Quick loading snip here, and then we're inside Owl's Head. The chap ahead of us is using coconuts to pretend to be riding a horse, but people who copy Monty Python aren't big or clever. Well, you can't afford any of the scenery in Owl's Head, so let's just cover it up with inventory and see what you do start with. You don't have any coal, no ingot molds, or anything much that we require to craft with. We also still don't have any arrows that we can equip in any obvious way that I could find, so I couldn't defend myself from the punishing PvP I had earlier, even had I wanted to try. I do have this rusted sword I looted from a skeleton though, so I equipped that, knowing that ahead of me there's a trainer I can try and swap my skill sets out with. Again, as a newbie there's no easy way except through trial and error in learning where the trainers are. We'll come back to how combat and skills work later. For now though, this will be our base of operations, as you have numerous NPC crafting shops and tables to our right. As a brief aside though, I do like how the scene weather matches the description, alongside in-game date and time, that's shown underneath the compass. The skills trainer is just around this corner here over on our left, as revealed by pressing the N key to show overhead names. But, you don't need to see exactly what happens next with the cow. Let's just skip ahead a bit. Okay, this is the journal where information you learn from NPCs is stored, including the quests you're given. I get a bit confused here trying to work out why I can't click the pages and flip through it. It's possible this has changed since I last played, and I need to select a subheading first, but other books still allow page turning from the title. It's a tiny annoyance, but the game is still full of them. Notice that I've managed to get the cow's name and number. Yep, Nemo's definitely got the moves. Sorry, an utterly terrible pun there. I'll stop milking the topic now. Instead, here's the crafting centre for Owl's Head. We'll be using this as our base. If you own a home, you can place your own crafting tables, and in theory recall straight back to it, but that may not remain in-game at launch. There's a short jump cut here as I took a break. From this point on, I'm recording to the larger hard drive rather than the SSD, due to the uncompressed file sizes. I check what I need for crafting. You start the game with a pickaxe so we can mine our iron ore, but we need the iron mould and enough coal for each craft to do anything with it. You don't start with a whole lot of gold to buy them in advance either. And each item has durability, after exhausting which it no longer works. Notice that the sorting of inventory is alphabetical, but the naming conventions are inconsistent. Coal is actually chunk of coal, and therefore comes before coconuts. These are the coconuts that we saw in use as a horse earlier. We can afford to be a horse, but not to buy any coal. If you've ever played any Minecraft, you'll recognise a similar crafting model here. Your character in-game doesn't know how to make items. You'll need to learn the recipes manually. What this means is that just like in Minecraft, everyone's going to go to the wiki and Google what the requirements are just to save time. However, once crafted in-game in Shroud, at least they appear here in this book. That's the last bit of sympathy the system has for you though. And here we are at my chosen starting point. It's from here that it takes 2 hours to craft my first item. The video then will seem a little disjointed as I chop the experience down to any sort of watchable size. I'll cut out travel or repeat experiences that don't aid understanding, so you'll be seeing a lot of clipboards, I'm afraid. And just a quick reminder, you can't afford any of this stuff that we're rushing past. Coming up on our left, we see a hot air balloon, and that alone costs $100. I'm probably going to sound very depressed for the rest of this video, because whilst looking through screenshots to illustrate future problems, I was reminded of how much hope I had back at Kickstarter that a combination of visionary developers and a rather more mature community than is typically found in an MMO would lead to fantastic things. It hasn't really panned out, however. Here we are in Owl's Nest, and we're immediately massively ganked by snare-throwing spiders. The issue here is that there's no way to judge whether I can fight these or not, and that flows from both a bad design choice in thinking that the previous decade and a half of three-dimensional MMO development has got nothing to teach to Shroud, and also listening to the wrong elements of the community. In this case, the part that thinks giving feedback in-game is dumbing it down and insists upon obscurity and difficulty for difficulty's sake. Many of us try to explain what this does to combat. My own thread you can see here discussing it turns a year old soon, but it's largely ignored because the weight of influence lies elsewhere, with those who spent the most money and are the most supportive of the current design ethos, whether it works or not. The same obscurity applies to resources. Each zone has a hidden difficulty and there's no way to know beforehand if your skills are enough to tackle them. Here we can mine the blue crystal at least, and the nearby NPC will buy the crystal, so I'd once have recommended this as the perfect starting zone, and I'd tell you how many crafts I'd done in this cave, except Portaleum seems to have reset the Steam achievements now. Still in alpha, remember? Bah! NPCs are notoriously picky about what items they'll buy, and offer frankly insulting prices for the things that they do. This is deliberate again, you're expected to sell to other players, but there just aren't that many players around yet. Here he offers us a measly 3 gold for the crystal we've just mined. We also can't steal Three Fingers' own buck and sell it back to him, unfortunately. In-game bucks originally were going to be seeded from player-written and submitted fiction, but arguments over being rewarded with store credit for doing so led to this initiative being shut down. Originally I was against the clear greed involved, but having seen how you simply can't feel part of the game unless you're store whoring constantly, I'm rather more sympathetic now. Another small illustration of this is that I steal Three Fingers' mug too, but you can't drop items back into the real world, not even to abandon them, and he doesn't miss it enough to buy it back again. The only way to have any influence then is to own a home, where I could display my stolen trophy mug. As I don't own a home, and there's a weight limit to what you carry, I end up simply destroying it.
Ha ha! Take that, Three Fingers! I strikes a blow for the mugless!
Now, when I had an ancestor pledge, the 3 swords, armour and equipment I had meant I could solo these red sash mobs here right from the start and clear the entire cave for my own personal use. It isn't an issue then for those who pay to win. Now I'm a contemptible peon, however, and gimped with archery skills but no arrows, and I also can't see that these are way beyond me. What's worse, you're not imagining how awkward combat looks. Originally the elitist community wanted auto-attack removed entirely, but doing so clearly ruined combat. As a compromise it's now in, but you have to enable it by pressing the T key first. Why? Don't ask questions. Meanwhile I immediately die, and again there was no way to know I'd die without trial and error. Death fortunately just means remaining as a ghost until you find an ankh, the timer ends, or another player resurrects you. There's not much chance of that though when the population is so low, but fortunately you can see the nearest ankh on the compass, and it was just around the corner. Now the red sashes have had their revenge, let's get on with the mining. Copper is the entry level ore, but it might come in handy later when... 2% success chance? You're having a laugh, mate. It's thus going to be impossible to even collect the iron for our cutlass at those odds, and there's no way to know where else in the world it might be easier to get, which was indeed the case in prior releases. If hidden difficulty has been removed, and it's not easy to cross-check this with the tiny community that's more focused on having dance-offs with everyone in private TeamSpeak rather than doing much testing of the game or updating the public wikis, we're going to have to get stuck into the skill system first. So whilst the jelly, settlingly slow progress bar doesn't progress, I'll take the time to explain the skills. The 2 bars at the bottom are crafting and adventuring experience, and it used to be the case that a simple level up would give you skill points to spend in each. Now it's usage based, so this should in theory be raising our mining level just for trying it. We still need to spend cash at the trainer to unlock the skills, however. I think basic mining success is the first icon highlighted, but the wiki has absolutely no details on this. There also doesn't seem to have been any progress made in this either, whilst the 2 icons below show small bars. I'm in the process of wondering if I should mine the blue crystal to both raise my mining skill and sell the crystals to Three Fingers in order to afford the upgrades, when I noticed that coincidentally the game has collapsed down to a pathetic 3 frames per second as well. I had hoped it was the skills window causing an issue, but closing this doesn't seem to have helped. The cave has virtually no decoration in it and little impressive lighting either, but I resort to bringing up the options and flipping to the earlier suggested good settings just in case. The game doesn't clearly show what it changes, nor if I require a restart to apply them, and as you can see we're still stuck with a spouse-batteringly awful frame rate, and it's clear the game isn't going to be any more forgiving in the near future. Wondering if it's a memory leak, I decide to shut down completely and try from scratch. Notice your character stays in game for 20 seconds after you log out. I'm not giving up on my cutlass just yet though, so I come straight back into game to follow the potential mining path discussed. Lots and lots of blue crystal mining ahoy. Here's a question for you all though. Do you consider yourself unlucky? Do you feel like the dice gods hate you? Are you a sinner in the eyes of RNGesus? I'm not being silly here. Games which rely upon random rolls are at the whim of how the public perceive their luck. And one huge design flaw with Shroud is that the resource gathering times are so long it gives you plenty of time to ponder your own blessings or otherwise. And so it feels offensively unfair when it fails. It's not outside of normal luck to fizzle twice on roughly 50-50 odds as I do here, but because I've had to wait so long to see the result, it feels hateful all the same. In fact, it takes so long, I managed to have a quick discourse on the perception of luck in between all these mining attempts. You do gain skills on failure though, which is a genuinely good thing. I do also like how there are little hints of thought behind the decoration choices. We can half-inch this dress hidden inside the treasure chest, which most likely is meant to belong to the female NPC who always lives inside this room. And it's nice to be able to operate the torches on the walls, although why said NPC prefers to live in the dark is not really explicable. What is unforgivable, however, is that when we approach the red sashes again, the frame rate chokes worse than a baby trying to eat a sticky toffee pudding. And there's nothing in the cave to cause it. Whether it's a programming error, an optimization, or an engine problem. As an aside, it turns out that the Unity engine can't have terrain which crosses over itself on a map. Watch closely as we walk around and you'll see we never loop around on ourselves, which will explain the frankly poor designs of the cave systems in-game. They can't show any complexity with the tiny map sizes restraining them. In the meantime, trying to solve the graphics lag, I first take off aggressive loading in case it's the nearby Sunia that's causing it. It's clearly not, as my monster system is still being brought to its knees. Trying to mine in single-figure frame rates, though, gives me plenty of time to ponder other likely culprits. I try twice to get persistent lighting to turn off and stick, as well as removing anti-aliasing. Either the game recovers by itself, or one of these brings it briefly back to being playable again. In the meantime, I'm still trying to get this one crystal. I'd snipped nearly a further minute of mining here, as ultimately I fail 5 times in a row at 43% odds to get a crystal worth a measly 3 gold pieces, as can be seen in this chat window. When I do loot it, you'll notice that the inventory window value of 5 gold pieces doesn't match what NPCs actually pay, which is only 3. And when we go to mine the next crystal, it reports a slightly better success chance. And although it's a different sized crystal to the prior crystal, it seems to have the same potential loot. We've not gained any skill according to the chat window, and would have had to have spent gold back at the trainer anyway to unlock it. So as far as I can tell, it's not my getting better that's changed the success rate. And the next node is the same size as the first, and is also reported at 49% success rate too. There just isn't any consistency to how the game is structured at all. Why this isn't being picked up on by the alpha testing community is probably because if you spent like a whale, you'll have a huge range of freebies, such as special mining tools, that mitigate the issue. You don't have to care too much about judging the difficulty because for you, it's not that difficult. Having come back to the game knowing what to do, but being physically unable to do it is miserable for me though. And now, as promised in part 1 of this review, the worst part of the actual gameplay, the sound effects in combat. By Gotan's flaming orange balls, it's bad. The following isn't an artifact of the sound editing process of this video either. Listen for how the death sound does roughly sync with my death, but as for the rest, oh dear. The most staggering thing about that badly synced amateur hour symphony of suckage, the wolf sounds used to be even worse. At least now it sounds vaguely aggressive, but it used to sound like someone was stepping on a dachshund. For years, Shroud has been coasting on a hodgepodge of cheap third-party Unity assets, community-donated materials, and whatever rough systems can be bodged in between them all, whilst the community itself just hasn't cared about the core game, as long as they can keep being distracted with ever more store-bought G-Gores and promises of further being treated as special over the base-level user. Sound is the worst victim of this, and it really hasn't improved in implementation since the first public release. It's not something you can quickly polish either by just choosing better samples, as you need to seriously plan the context and situations the sound effects are used in. As it currently stands, it doesn't even match what I'm doing with my sword or what my opponents are currently up to. Talking of combat and being sick of dying, we're going to have to go into that system in some detail now. It's a weird mix of a collectible card game, something like Hearthstone, and the typical MMO powerbar staples, something like World of Warcraft, with the worst elements of all of them. You have a deck, which contains the powers you can use. Answering the questions in part 1 of this review forced me into taking a ranger deck with pure archery skills. Equipping a sword doesn't unlock sword skills, I still have to buy them from a trainer. Attempting to make a new deck allows me to add any skills I know into the deck, to make up a total of 30 skills, with the rest being filled with useless blanks. From here they're treated like cards. They're randomly dealt to your power bar along with the blanks. What makes it so bad though? Well, the fun of a CCG is that you can sit on cards you've been dealt to save for tactical advantages or cheesy moves. Here, your skills are on a very fast timer and decay. Whilst you can combine skills, these new combinations also decay in a few seconds. Use them or lose them, I'm afraid. In effect, you just end up playing a very fast game of Simon Says. To tackle that, you can now at least force certain powers to appear in certain hotbar slots, so you can trigger them more instinctively. But this just makes you have a typical MMO hotbar, where your powers for some reason randomly pop in and out, rather than having fixed timers. Why? Don't ask questions! Or you can just go the full hog and swap to a pure MMO style fixed hotbar at a higher casting cost, which makes the whole card mechanic totally pointless. As at this stage I can't add any new skills, there's no point in trying with custom decks, so I just delete them all and go back to being a ranger. Later on, if you stick with the game, I'd recommend custom over fixed, as the combat is so poor the special attacks really don't do much more than add damage increase, and being able to boost your damage more often, because of lesser casting cost, is worth far more than being able to predictably press the keys. But then again, the combat is also so poor, it doesn't really matter that much either way. Skipping ahead again, and I've been mining a few more crystals, and you'll notice my success rate has risen once more. So, by now I suspect that passing mining skills at least don't need the trainers to improve. I decide then that I want to test the iron mining success rate just to be sure. I'm also aware that the iron is going to be in the room with the wolves, and I don't currently stand a chance of killing them and making the room safe for mining. Keeping your weapon sheathed allows you to heal whilst moving, however, and I prepare to abuse the monster pathfinding to comic effect. Yes, sadly, rather than fix the very silly pathfinding, monsters now just teleport out of wherever they get stuck. It means we're not going to be able to mine iron until we can afford to buy weapon skills to shit the wolves to raise our mining skills. I still want to know what the iron success rate is, so back I go, and it's only 3%. And well, that's quite enough of that, wouldn't you say? So far we've only made 43 gold in crystal and 143 if we sold the weapon improving gem too. There's just no point in staying here. Fortunately, I know a much easier and safer way to earn some money crafting. I've returned back to Owl's Head. There's a number of sheep, chicken and pigs around the central market, and we can brutalise them and take their lovely giblets and craft with them. My new aim is to do this until I can afford to purchase new skills. Watch as nearby decoration pops in again only when you're right on top of it, because aggressive loading is now turned off, and Shroud is still running from the solid state drive, remember. It's just visually ghastly. Oh, and of course you can't afford any of that stuff anyway, remember, you stinking filthy peasant. The sheep live just across this bridge, and the inhabitants of Owl's Head take a rather relaxed attitude to your killing their livestock. I also don't get personally attacked again in any of the remainder of this video, so where there are jump cuts, you're not missing any PvP either. Harvesting the flock is a simple case of murdering the mutton and then double-clicking upon them. It's unbelievably boring, but it's the easiest way to make money with crafting. Farming and agriculture are promised, with the latter being in-game currently for homeowners only, but it's anyone's guess whether the final versions will follow the same mechanics as here. Let's hope not, as you can see the same shockingly slow resource bars remain with skinning too. I don't think there's anything to prevent anyone else coming along and skinning these sheep before I can get to them. But again, the player base is so disengaged from actually playing the game, I've not seen anyone try and pinch my hides or even kill the sheep themselves so I can try and steal their hides in countless releases. You may also wonder why I'm torturing myself with skinning every single sheep, but that's because you've not seen the true horror of crafting that lies ahead. We're going to need thousands of these carcasses, and probably one of those little dippy woodpecker things to automate our key presses a bit. One last sheep and off we go. The building ahead of us, by the way, is the College of Arms. You'll be able to buy your own personal heraldry there at some point in the future, with backers having their unique designs reserved. Like almost every other system though, it's fallen by the wayside. Don't expect it until long after the game launches. This is the guy we want though, Mr. Skills Trainer. Our aim is to level mining so we can make a cutlass, but whilst we can see mining proficiency has since risen, he refuses to tell us how much gold it costs to upgrade this. It's possible it doesn't cost anything, and we just need to spend 100 gold to unlock the new skills, and then use them to raise them. That you have insufficient gold to learn this skill message could be a leftover from the past, or my empty pockets could be a genuine issue. But it's vague and confusing, and by this time I've lost patience in digging through the documentation to work out what the actual thinking is. Instead, I change plan. I'm going to craft something I know works, and see if I can make any money that way. I'm going to make myself some food. Which leads straight into the next problem, that the public crafting pavilions don't have all of the crafting tables, only the smithing, the woodworking and the tailoring ones. I happen to know that a private home next door usually puts all their tables up for free public access, but you the newbie have to hunt down the specific tables first too. We're going to need this cooking table instead for our new target of pork and beef loaf. Beginning the series skipping after bashing some bar lambs, I realise you don't start the game with the required tool, so I need to buy a cleaver to work these resources. Taking the opportunity to sell off some of our prior loot, I discover that the dress I took earlier is only worth a single gold too, confirming yet again that the game absolutely hates player to NPC interactions. From here we need to go to the cooking table next door and convert these sheep carcasses to resources and sell them in order to purchase the other components of the pork and beef loaf. We can't grow any of those other components ourselves yet as we don't have a home, so we don't have access to agriculture or farming. Accessing the table, you find you don't know the basic recipes for sheep, chickens or pigs. If you try and guess but get the ratios wrong, the crafting won't work, so it's off to Google we go. The exact recipe is a single sheep carcass and the cleaver. This lights up the craft option, and once completed the recipe now appears in our book. You can click the book to craft it again, but if you thought you could then just somehow craft all of our carcasses in one go, no, you have to do it one by one manually each time. And the user interface often lags and doesn't place your items back into the trade window, so you very quickly lose focus on where in the crafting process you are. It has to go, double-click recipe in the book, click craft on the table when the items are visible on the table, then click take all on the table and repeat. Let's just watch how much fun this is, shall we? So take all, click the book, click craft, no wait, take all, okay, book, click craft, book, no, take all, book, come on book, craft, take all, book, craft, take all, wait, no, the crafting didn't work. Book, craft, take all, I think that one did. Book, craft, take all. I'm getting very, very bored now. Very bored indeed. Book, take all. No, too soon. Book, craft, take all. Book, craft, take all. Book, come on, book. Oh wait, nope, we've run out of carcasses. Thank God. Someone else with more focus at this point could have done that so much more smoothly, I admit. And of course, grinding is more old-fashioned and hardcore, if that really matters to you. But it's absolutely no fun, and in a game so empty of easily found content, is this mechanism really going to be forgiven by the average player? I rather doubt it. I've chopped the next swathe of hunting and skipped forward to purchasing the missing items. As mentioned, in theory we will one day be able to grow some of these ourselves. Public farming land is planned, but like everything else comes second to pampering the financial elite for now. It's not immediately obvious just how dysfunctional the NPC economy is, but I'll total up all the costs at the end to show you. For now, I'm just buying the items I absolutely need for my crafting target. I also buy potatoes and carrots that I don't need, and I have absolutely no idea why. I might have been thinking of potato soup that day. Soup. One thing I do like about trading is that you can queue buying and selling at the same time, and it goes as one total transaction. One irritating thing, though, is that there's no clear logic again behind the inventory stocked. You'd think that Tanderley the farmer would have the eggs and milk, but it's actually on the baker next door. I'll do some dairy shopping whilst I'm here all the same. But why, having just said that about buying and selling, I don't do any selling the first time when I notice I'm short of gold, I again have no idea. And with hindsight, I also notice I forgot the milk as well. Look, it's been a long day of boring gameplay for you, my beloved viewers. I'm tired and I'm hungry. Leave me alone. But see how when I do sell, we gain a fair amount of gold for all the materials we've gathered. Raising these skills, then, is so much more lucrative than trying to become a blacksmith. It doesn't help us raise mining, but with the gold we're earning, we're well on our way to just buying a cutlass instead. I snip some unimportant stuff and move on to finding the bovine meat. There are apparently wild cows near Slowdown that we can hunt, but if you've ever thought of hurting a cow, you're a bad man and should be punished. We're going to pay for our tasty cow flesh instead. It's just a shame that the economics of this trading really don't make any sense. The prices the NPCs demand are just awful. Incidentally, my showing how you could love cows and kidnap vital quest NPCs with the shoving mechanism is perhaps in part why we now have Slowdown on push-through instead. The devs do listen to some decent feedback, they're just horrendously bad at filtering it out from the greedy whales. The next ingredient we need for our grub is wooden plates. You'd think they'd be craftable from wood, but they're not, and as finding trees to chop is a whole new nightmare that we don't want to get into today, I'm just glad they're purchasable from barkeepers for now. After that, we need garlic. This can be harvested by the players manually, but in keeping with Shroud's funky sense of logic, cooks and farmers don't have it, and it's classified purely as a reagent and found at alchemists instead. Currently, the idea is that you'll need these reagents to cast certain spells, but alpha yada yada. Next, I want to be sure that I can afford the recipe for the meal, as the wiki is often out of date and doesn't have the right ingredients listed. So a bit of chicken plucking later to earn more gold, and here we are at the vendor. It's not known if these recipe scrolls will still be in game at launch, as there was talk of leaving them unknown so people could gain fame by discovering them first. Once more though, the inventory logic is skewed. Craftable food isn't listed under consumables and is sorted under P for plate rather than its food type. Still, no matter, we have it at last and we're going to have a spiffing nosh, just as soon as we finally make one. You need to open your inventory and read the scroll to add it to your crafting book, where, yes, it's bugged and doesn't appear until you turn the book's pages back and forth first. Yada yada, alpha. It's a decent feature though that the book also shows in dark text which ingredients you have upon you. Also extremely admirable, the chap we pass outside under a rain cloud purchased that emote from the store, but half the proceeds went to a clean water providing charity. Every now and then the devs do support fundraising for good causes, and don't get me wrong, I think they do have good hearts and they aren't bad people as some have suggested. They've just not been able to work the same game design magic as they did 30 years ago. Oh, that chap also had one of the first wave of tameable pets with him, a wolf, but I don't have time to step on that dash run today. Let's go get some food instead. I'll leave this final part running in full just to show gameplay unbroken by snipping again. Looking at the book, I notice I don't have the cooking pot, and this is also where I realise in game I forgot to buy the milk. I return to the pavilion for the pot, but the milk is on the farmer who's quite some distance away, and this is one of the bits I snipped out earlier. The graphic settings are still set to good for this video, don't forget. It doesn't make all that much difference compared to maximum to my eyes, but the shadows from the trees are especially nice, I feel, and go a long way to removing much of the ugliness of this a la carte world. And let's take the opportunity of this running about downtime to have another listen to the sounds of Shroud of the Avatar. It's pleasant, but did you spot the errors? Thunder during clear blue skies and light winds, and the stereo positioning of the waterfall was to the right when the water was to our left. The music isn't specific to Owl's Head either, and repeats a small playlist whichever town you're in. Finally though, after all the grinding, we're going to craft something. No, really, we're going to craft something. We spent an hour trying to mine, and now another hour on earning enough to craft some food, so let's craft it. Why aren't we crafting it? Pulling up the chat window shows why. We've failed the crafting chance. If you weren't aware of what the crafting chance was, well, when we accessed the table, a tiny little number appeared next to the name of the item, and apparently it says something like 30%. So let's keep crafting until we get it. Another minor irritant is that the chat window auto-closes unless pinned. Pinning it allows every NPC, including player and vendors, to spam at you though. But never mind the spam, we have pork and beef loaf! Hurrah! We could sit here and stuff our chops with it, but I want to show you the final parts of the economy instead. Firstly, let's go and see what huge reward you get for this gargantuan effort to unleash the power of the loaf. You can already tell I'm being sarcastic, can't you? Admittedly, once you have a stable income and you know the recipe, You could easily buy all the ingredients and it would be a 2-minute job to run from the butcher's down to the crafting table and then over towards this NPC to sell the pork loaf, where you'll notice it yet again offers a much lower price than the one listed in your inventory. But even so, 52 gold for all 4 plates is an absolute mickey take. And it's not just this item. The devs had stated by design they don't want you selling to NPCs for any kind of profit at all. Let's just illustrate exactly how much loss we've taken here. At its simplest then, the basic resources cost 3 times as much as the completed final product. Unless you're grinding out skills, buying and selling from NPCs is completely pointless. The alternative then is to sell it on the auction house to other players. That's going to be a very risky proposition when everyone can be a crafter as well as a warrior, and there aren't going to be that many players with the way the game is developing. But read those conditions carefully. You not only have to pay an upfront fee of 10% plus 10 gold charge for any auction you place, but if it doesn't sell within 7 days, it gets sold to another NPC anyway, so you'd still only get the 52 gold for your pork loaf. I don't know if the auction fee gets refunded if a player buys it, but to be frank, the whole system looks like a disaster in the making at present. The only thing it makes sense to risk, if you can't get online and cancel the auction before the NPCs half-inch it, is going to be the things people desperately need or can't easily craft. What those things could possibly be is unknown at present, as nothing is rare in-game except via the eternally damned real cash store. It's only the tedium of crafting that ensures everyone isn't already doing it. I apologise if some of these points are being repeated from the first review, but it really is the case that the funding model has poisoned every part of the game, and it comes up time and time again as to why the gameplay is stumbling so badly. So for our last port of call in this video, I want to show you the kind of in-game money Portaleum is expecting you to pay for standard housing in this game. Let's call it the pork loaf exchange rate, where 1 pork plate took us an hour to make. The public cash chest is the scrubber equivalent of the $20 ornate chest that's in the store. Assuming we can somehow grow all our own resources, or we put another hour of animal annihilating in again, that works out as 385 pork plate hours. The decoration that doesn't have any equivalent in the store is much more generous in price, and to be honest, the financial reward from combat is so much greater you'd be a fool to be trying to craft to afford any of this. A few skeletons give enough gold to buy these chairs, for instance, but let's stay with our pork futures for now. To own a home, we need both a lot deed and a house deed. The city lot is the largest lot those not dropping thousands of real dollars before the game launches will ever be able to have. The road deed is the smallest possible property for anybody. We need to work 7,692 pork hours to get the city lot, and a mere 1,154 pork hours for the row deed. The cheapest row houses will only take us 9.5 pork productions though, which isn't too bad. Remember that these are speculative figures though, they don't take into account any exponentially increasing wealth we may get as we level up, or things like access to public farmlands which may reduce our production costs or times. In my own case, I could roughly half those times by just not making any pork loaves at all and selling the ingredients directly. Taking the 20,000 gold figure for a $20 store item as a rough estimate, that gives us a $1 to 1,000 gold exchange rate and indicates that Portaleum expects in-game city lots which will be taxed whereas founder ones aren't, to still be worth roughly $600 on the market, which means Nemo isn't likely to be gaining property anytime soon. And so, having left Nemo waving his fist impotently again at the scurvy landlubbers who spoil all his dreams, I'm going to end this review here. I've still not done any real wandering outside the cities yet, which is possibly giving a somewhat unfair perspective on the game. But remember that Darkstar quote at the start once more. Content isn't going to be pushed as hard in the next 6 months, so don't expect the cities at least to change all that much. My advice then remains the same. For goodness sake, wait and see what the game launches with. But for now, wishing you all a fantastic new year in 2016, and thank you again for watching part 2 of this review of Shroud of the Avatar.